The story of Kentucky's offseason continues. There's been a lot of discussion around how their offseason has moved. And obviously, with it being early June, you're seeing lists come out, you're having conversations, narratives come out as far as, what do you think Kentucky's offseason looks like? Where do you think they rank in the preseason? And our good friends over at the Field of 68, shout out to Rob and Jeff, who always do great work. We always talk about a lot of their stuff they do on here. Rob came out yesterday, or maybe a day or so ago in the last couple of days, and said that, kind of just to paraphrase, you can't have a conversation about the number one team in the country without mentioning Kentucky. Basically saying that, as he went on to talk about, like when you talk about the UConns, the Houstons, the Purdue's, the Floridas, those teams of the world, even like the Louisvilles, you need to put in Kentucky into that number one conversation. Now, there is some good points there that I do agree with. I mean, Kentucky gets Ortega way back. Mark Pope is ascending to be one of the better coaches in college basketball. They have so much talent that Jeff Goodman said, I think like a month ago, that, Kentucky might have too much talent, like might have too many mouths to feed, which obviously Kentucky fans didn't like really, you know, I guess adjust to that too well. But let's start with this before we get to Rob saying like they should be the number one team in the country, because I think this is a really interesting talking point that comes up with a lot of teams, not just Kentucky. It's there's this there's this side that I feel like people choose, like, are they too talented or do they not have enough talent? It's like you don't have enough talent, go get talent. Then it's, oh, you have too much talent. What are you doing? I guess I'll ask you, Dion, with the too talented conversation. One, is Kentucky too talented? And then two, is there like such thing as really too talented? Because when I say that out loud, like, oh, my biggest issue is that my team's too talented, that that sounds like a great problem to have.
I think it's a great problem to have if your team's too talented. I do think with where we're at with NIL and everything, this is kind of like the I mean, you have a newborn son. NIL is in its newborn era, right? And I think it reminds me a lot of like when the NBA gets like a cap jump and like a couple teams are just like really, really good, and then it balances itself out a little bit. I think we're in the era of like teams having a whole lot of talent. Kentucky's not the only one. Like I look at UConn and I'm like, where does Braylon Mullins fit into this? He's a McDonald's All-American, right?
Mm.
Like you look at Purdue and it's like they just brought in a professional basketball player, Meyer, and it's like where does he fit in necessarily on like the pecking order when he could have been like a number one option somewhere? That is a great problem for Purdue, UConn, and Kentucky to have with all the talent that they have, and they are able to make it work. Those are three probably the three best coaches in the country, in my opinion. And it's fine. Like I don't see an issue with it, but I do think we're in the era where there's a lot of talented dudes that are going to come off the bench or play roles that like typically they wouldn't have to play. Um, you can make a lot of money doing that though, at the end of the day, right? So if they buy in, I don't think it's an issue at all. It comes down to the coaching staff. I think it comes down to the individual players. Um, as well. I look at Jaden Quaidens and Denzel Aberdeen, right? Like those are two dudes that could be number one options on other teams. Denzel Aberdeen probably could have stayed at Florida and been the guy. Jaden Quaidens could literally probably play professional basketball next year, but if he was eligible, he could be the number one option like anywhere he wanted to go. I think those two are going to buy into roles where they don't get the ball that much on offense, and they're probably two of the best defenders in the country because of it. And they're gonna put 70% of their energy into the defensive side of things. So I don't think it's an issue for Kentucky at all because of the guys that they brought in. And but I think you could, right? Look at Kansas State last year. Very, very talented team. Probably too talented, but the guys you brought in weren't willing to play into certain roles. The teams that scare me with that are more of like the Louisvilles of the world, where it's like, is Michael Brown gonna buy into like not being the guy when he committed to the university when they had nobody else? What is Adrian Woolley gonna do coming from Kennesaw State where he could do whatever he wanted to now you're kind of like that fourth option, maybe? And so I don't necessarily see that with Kentucky per se, but I do think we are in the era where there's a lot of teams that are too talented, and it comes down to the coach to get that buy-in to these players doing less roles because players are transferring from being the first option to schools where they're not at the moment.
Yeah, and like, look, the I do think that there are issues that come with having so many mouths to feed, for lack of a better term, right? But like that's part of what you it's part of why you feel good. If I'm Kentucky, I guess I'll put it in this terms. Not to I hate to do this because like it throws other coaches under the bus, but like I trust Mark Pope to figure it out. Like get the talent. I trust Mark Pope to figure it out. I'd rather him have a plethora of talent and figure it out because there probably are going to be guys that are a little bit upset or like you said, if everyone buys into their role, then you get something special going with that team, and that's Mark Pope's job to do so. And Mark Pope's job to pull the right strings, and I feel good about Mark Pope pulling the strings there. If this was the roster with all due respect, and you gave me like a Mike Woodson or a Hubert Davis or like one of the coaches or like a Kevin Willard, I would be like, well, they're not gonna figure it out, right? They're not gonna it won't happen.
This video is brought to you by NBA 2KLab.com. 2K Lab worked with us last summer as well. They're one of our favorite entities in all of sports gaming. We want to show you their college basketball stadium locator challenge game. And I'm going to share a screen right now as we do this. South Carolina, bang. Oh,
Ooh,
okay, that's pretty good. Next, North Carolina. Why are we only getting the Carolinas?
please
Bang.
lock in.
St. John's, that's New
New
York.
York.
Bang.
Where's New Jersey?
We're on fire. Colorado. I actually don't know what state Colorado is.
It's in Colorado. There's a state of
Is that
Colorado.
this one?
It's to the right of Phoenix.
Anyway, you get the picture. This game's really fun. They've got more games as well, like Guess the NBA Player, Mystery Fantasy Draft, and more. Stay tuned for all of the college football content and games that they'll be putting together to help you get the best experience out of college football 26. Back to the video.
Willard didn't deserve that stray.
I had to work it in. But like to my point, I trust Mark Pope to figure it out. And look, as a fan of a team that I in Michigan State who I think could use some more talent, would love to have a too talented issue. That sounds amazing. That sounds like really nice to have. I would 100% welcome anybody calling my team too talented and figuring it out. And look, this is not to say that Jeff's not wrong in that because we have seen like these two talented teams with a different like type where everyone's not on the same page and it self-destructs and it is bad news and it is something that needs to be overcome. But I trust Mark Pope to figure it out, and I trust the guys too who bought into the role to kind of know what they need to do and figure it out. But to shift this one, Dion, I do want to ask you, when having these preseason number one conversations, is Kentucky a team that should be considered?
Yeah, I mean, well, real quick, like one other aspect on them being too talented. I've said this a few times the last few weeks when we get on these videos. I think Otega Owe didn't get drafted because he was the primary scorer last year. I think Otega Owe is going back to Kentucky to play a lesser role. And I think he knows that's his path to the draft, and he's going to be the glue guy that makes this work. And that because that's his like he's Lou Dort in the NBA, right? He's 3-and-D. You could also call him Aaron Neesmith or some of these a lot of these dudes that are playing in the finals, Alex Caruso even. If he goes back to Kentucky and plays that role, they have enough guys to where they're still scoring. And he gets to play a role that showcases his biggest strengths to the NBA, and Kentucky's still fine. And I do believe there's no conversation about who's number one in the country without Kentucky being right at the top of it, right? I think I still have Purdue, Houston, Duke. Those are my top three. But Kentucky's right there though. Like Kentucky, like if it's those three, Kentucky's four, maybe UConn's five. And I think there is no order you could put those five in where I would be like upset. You could have it in any order you want.
Yeah, I mean, I look, I see this from both sides because I say this on a lot of ranking videos. I think sometimes people fall victim to the groupthink thing and just like rank what team should be up there. With that said, though, I would only have because I think in my preseason poll, I would have Kentucky somewhere around five, anywhere between five and I don't think it should be anywhere outside 10. So like when everyone's ranked, nowhere outside 10, maybe it's high as five. I don't think I'd go higher than that. With that said, though, I want to have them at five. Think they're really, really good, but they're also not in the discussion for the number one team, in my opinion. Like I think it's Houston. I think it's Purdue, and maybe stretch it to UConn and Florida, maybe. But like I'm really just having a conversation with just Purdue and Houston, to be honest with you, for the preseason number one. But like I said, if you're putting a team top five, that's the thing that I feel like people don't even realize sometimes. Like any team in the top five, you could probably make an argument for being the number one team, right?
The Florida stuff is just like, hey, you guys won last year. We want to continue to be nice. It's not actually the roster, right?
No, it's the roster. They got a lot of pieces back. Boogie and Xavier Lee backcourt. I'm very much in on them.
They got a guard from Princeton and a guard that Kentucky beat already last year.
Wait a second. Arkansas beat Kentucky.
It once.
That's all that matters. One time's enough. That's all that matters. Look, I just like the floor. I like the backcourt. I like Florida's roster. But like I said, the number one team, though, I'm really only having a conversation between Houston and Purdue. I'm stopping the conversation really after that.
I think that's fair. If that's the conversation, I get it. I think if it stretches beyond Purdue and Houston, anybody, Kentucky has to be in that next group, in my opinion. I think to me, Florida's a stretch. Duke is getting incredibly disrespected, but that's okay. That's probably what we want. Banner six on the way, no big deal. And then I think UConn also is being. I can't believe I'm saying this, and Hurley's gonna love it. UConn's also being disrespected. I think it's Purdue, Houston, UConn, and then you stretch it to Duke, Florida, Kentucky. I think you could also throw Tennessee in that group too.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's probably something like I guess I'll ask you this: what's the cutoff for teams that you would like outside like the top 10 teams could all be number one, or like what's the cutoff you think on like arguments of teams that could be number one?
I think it depends on the team within the top 10. So Florida for me, like I got to see it. That Duke, I could also understand if you have to see it because of how many new pieces they have. Kentucky, I just trust Mark Pope so much. I'm willing to have them in the conversation because I think it's all going to gel perfectly. Also, like when you look at the rosters of these teams, right? I think Florida's a little clunky. Um, I don't think Duke's clunky necessarily, but I think they might struggle out the gate just a tad. Tennessee's clunky. Florida, Kentucky gels together perfectly. Jalon Lowe, Aberdeen, Otega Owe, Quaidens, anybody at the five. Like that, that sentence makes perfect sense. Houston obviously is returning a lot. Purdue's returning a lot. UConn's returning a lot. We know those three are going to work. So I think those three are going to work, and then the rest are kind of just like depending on how you feel about the fit. So I think anybody in the top 10 could be in there if you believe that team gels together and fits perfectly out the gate. But I don't think all of them do.
Yeah, I think the argument is there, and I agree with honestly everything that you're saying. But I just think that Kentucky being at five is fine, and not being in consideration for number one is also fine. But with that said, like Kentucky fans and Kentucky people, I 100% agree with the excitement for this season, the excitement surrounding everything. It's a great roster. You got to take a whole way back. Like there's a lot of good things about this basketball team, and it might take some time getting like JQ back to like full health and things like that. But like when this team is figures it out and pulls it together, I think it'll be special because the one thing people don't bring up, I think, with Kentucky and Pope last year is that like he kind of brought together this hodgepodge of guys late, and they ended up being really good and they played great in big games. You think with the team he has now, probably a little bit more time with a lot of these guys, maybe a little bit more time to gel too. Things will possibly work out better. But shout out to the guys over at Philly 68. Shout out to Rob Douster. I do have to end with this though because Rob likes to take jabs at me, friendly ones, because like that's my guy. Like we talk all the time, things like that. I just want to say that though he is losing weight, he still looks like JoJo Siwa in the face. We will catch y'all on the rest of the segments on the channel.
Elite beard.